Hello and good evening from Germany and good day, morning to Canada and the rest of the world. Um, Welcome and thank you for tuning in to another episode of How Do You Immerse? Today we have a very special guest with us, my good buddy Jason Reynolds, also known as Redz, who is the monitor engineer for a whole bunch of really cool acts. For example, the Marley Brothers, Stephen Marley, and Shaggy. So, without any further ado, let's get him into the stream and introduce Redz. Here we go.
I'm acting like I was
Hello.
frozen, but I'm not frozen. What up, people?
Redz, really good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you? How's the weather over in Germany?
It's actually really nice.
Yeah,
So it's sunny, like early summer vibes, you know. So
nice.
perfect barbecue weather. So
Yeah, well, finally we have good weather here in Canada. So we've been spending a lot of time outside. I've been perfecting my barbecue chicken recipe. So,
ooh,
you know.
okay. Okay, change of plans, people. We're not talking about audio.
Now we're gonna talk about chicken.
Nice. And where are you at right now? Are you?
I am home in the beautiful town of Orangeville where I
Mhm.
live. That's about an hour north of Toronto for anybody who's familiar with the Toronto area.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm chilling in my basement with a Quantum 338. It's
Sweet.
real. This is not a virtual background. This is actually here. Thanks to my good friends from Gear Audio, Jeff Maurice, Peter Snellgrove, Bob Snellgrove, all the guys over there have been so great to me. So, yeah, I actually just shot a segment for Digico, locked up with a Digico. So,
Oh,
uh,
sweet.
yeah,
I
it's
didn't know it.
exciting times, man. I'm learning how to become a broadcaster. I'm a video guy now, apparently.
Story of all our lives right now, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard rumors that the video guys are paid much better than the audio guys. So
I we'll find
let's.
out. We're gonna find out for sure.
Nice. Okay, so you have your basement crammed up full with awesome gear. You're doing the Digico thing. You're doing the thing today with us.
Yeah.
Um, I guess a little bit later we can talk also about the other educational endeavors that you are doing.
Yes, sir, for sure.
Perfect. So everybody, Redz is using Klang since quite a while already now, and actually this year, I think it was a few days before NAM, we did a really cool training together at PSI in Toronto, um, and that's where actually I got the idea. Okay, we need to get Redz into one of those live streams in here, because he does a fantastic job explaining and showing how his workflow is and. How to get the maximum out of all the gear that we are, in the best case,
Hmm.
getting for our gigs, right?
Yep,
All
absolutely.
right. So, what was the last tour that you were on?
So I obviously work a lot on reggae music, and we don't necessarily have tours per se. We're starting to have more of those now, where we get in the bus and carry gear and head out on the road. But we do a lot of one-offs, a
Hmm.
lot of festivals. We had a tour lined up with Shaggy in the summer, across Europe. We were going to be in Germany for Summer Jam up in
Oh,
Cologne.
damn.
We're gonna be in Berlin. Like we had a few shows lined up in Germany, but coronavirus happened. But the last full, I would say, tour I was on would be with Stephen Marley. Before I handed it off to Davin. I'm not sure if Davin's watching, but Davin is now the day-to-day monitor engineer for Stephen Marley. I still do the Marley Brothers, so couple times a year, definitely for Kaya Fest, all the brothers come together and perform together. And
Hmm.
so I'm one of the monitor engineers for that. I mix the ears, and Dean Pond does the wedges and side fills. But yeah, I the last full tour I would say would have probably been. I was just in UK. I forgot about that. I was in the UK for 2 weeks on the Kistery Blast Off tour with Shaggy. um,
Nice.
just in March. How could I forget? Because I had to go into quarantine when I came home.
Oh no.
It was fun.
Oh yeah, it's weird times right now. But
Yeah, definitely.
well, yeah, you're one of the few people who actually had still a tour in March, actually.
Yeah, we were actually on tour in the UK when like coronavirus started to really explode, if you will, and we got home on March 13th. It was kind of weird. I'm traveling home in the middle of the pandemic outbreak. It was strange. So it
Mm.
was definitely an interesting experience. One of the most nervous I've ever been to travel in over 6 years at touring full time. So definitely an interesting experience. But it was a great tour. We finished it. Everybody's safe. Nobody. We came home all healthy and safe. So thank God for that.
It's very good to hear. Very, very good to hear. All right. Hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry? So, what was your path from being Little Reds to
The big
world
Redz.
traveling monitor engineer? Hey, the chicken rub, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Um, so my path is well, I was born and raised in Jamaica. Um, wouldn't trade any of that for the world. I love my country. I'm very proudly Jamaican. I grew up in church. My parents were never really, well, my mom specifically. My dad wasn't a church guy. My dad just did his thing, but my mom got saved when I was 1 year old. So my entire growing up, all I knew was church.
mhm.
Um, we we were attending one of the larger churches in Kingston, a church called Pentecostal Tabernacle. It's in downtown Kingston. And through the years, I was always involved in music there. But growing up, I was never allowed to listen to reggae music, which people might find strange considering that I grew up in Jamaica.
Yeah.
But we were only allowed to listen to gospel music in our house, which my mom was a huge Andre Crouch fan. So Andre Crouch was an early influence. Later on down the line, Kirk Franklin and Donnie McClurkin and these artists. Um, but when I was 11, I think, going into high school, Buju Banton's album Till Shiloh came out, and a friend of mine loaned me the CD, and I couldn't even like, I had to hide it when I took it home, because if my mother ever found me with that CD, it would have been like, I would have got a beating, bro. So I hate this, but that his voice, like when I listened to that CD for the first time, it kind of, I was like, wow, what is this? What is this voice? What is this music? And you would hear reggae music around, like, like buses blast music from out the windows, and you hear cars blasting music. So it's not that I was ignorant to what reggae music was, but I really didn't know how impactful the music was. So my first intro to it was through Buju Banton's album Till Shiloh, and I fell in love with the music. I started to deep dive into Bob Marley, into Beres Hammond. I became a big fan. And then growing up, just like listening to that music, I just really fell in love with music. I hated piano lessons though. So like playing music, and my grandfather, God rest his soul, was a actually known right across Jamaica for his piano playing, and he was an organist.
Wow.
Well known. He received the Order of Distinction from the Jamaican government for his music. So, it pains me to say that I hated piano lessons, but when I became a teenager, I took a liking to sound, and I started to volunteer in church, and my first mentor was a gentleman by the name of Paul Price.
Mhm.
Um, I learned everything I know now. I learned from him. I've just kind of over the years developed those skills, but he gave me my foundation, taught me what I needed to know about sound, taught me how sound works, taught me signal flow, patching, mixing, everything. Man, he's an incredible audio engineer. And so I learned in church, and I never really thought it would be a career because my parents weren't supportive of that. They wanted me to, go to school, get a degree, get like a real job, a real profession. So I wanted to be a pilot initially, and then after 9/11, I wasn't able to get a student visa to study flying. I got accepted into Florida Institute of Technology, but couldn't get the visa. So I kind of put that on hold and worked for 2 years while we were waiting for our Canadian papers to come through. And then in 2004, migrated to Canada, started going to University of Ontario Institute of Technology studying e-commerce, and a month into the program dropped out and went to study recording engineering at Metalworks, and the rest is history. Here I am, um, years later, in 2020, was that 16 years, and I've been touring, but I freelanced for a while, cut my teeth, still volunteered in church. Up to today, I'm very active in the church where I'm technical director. So I'm technical director at Faith Sanctuary, which is one of the larger churches in the Toronto area. And I continue to do that. I love gospel music. I love Christian music. I saw my friend Jade Desai, from Passion City Church log in on Facebook, one of my good friends. I'm still a church guy at heart. I love it. I'm there every Sunday now, producing our broadcast because we're stream only at this time. So I still love it. I think it's the best place to learn sound. I think it's the best place to cut your teeth, because it's consistent. It's you got 52 Sundays in a year, and it's open every one of them. And my church does 2 services, so that's 104 services that you're guaranteed a year. I mean, imagine having 104 shows. You'd get good. You know what I mean? If you were mixing
Absolutely.
104 times, you'd get good. So, yeah, that's I came up through the church world, and then got referred to Shaggy's then production manager, who is still front of house engineer, Dean Pond, who is a bigger brother to me, and really has become family. About 5 years ago, I got referred to him. They were looking for a monitor engineer, and my first touring gig was Shaggy. And 2 weeks after having a phone call with the tour manager, as in Guam and Philippines, do
Nice.
I'd never been to Asia Pacific region, and there we were, in Guam 2 weeks later.
That's
So that's kind of my story in a condensed version.
fantastic, fantastic. So basically, your path into reggae. I mean, you're mostly doing reggae aside from the church, right? So was that by choice or just one of those right time, right place moments?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both.
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in what you profess or what you put into the atmosphere. The law of attraction. People talk about the secret, whatever you call it. I'm a big believer in vocalizing things, and I used to say a lot that I wanted to be Shaggy's engineer.
Okay.
It's like the weirdest thing, right? And years later, Shaggy called when I got the call, and I remember meeting him for the first time. I mean, for me, I choose to continue to work in reggae music. No disrespect to the other genres of music and the other people watching, but I don't think there is another genre of music that is as impactful, per capita, as reggae music, and by extension dancehall music, rocksteady, ska, everything that is wrapped up into Jamaican culture. I love my culture. I am, like I said, I'm proudly Jamaican. But for a country that is as tiny as ours to have the impact on world music the way we have, it's a privilege for me to work in that genre, and it's a privilege to work with the top artists in that genre, because when you talk about Shaggy and the Marleys, that there is nobody else in that
Yeah.
air space. That's
That's
rare air. Shaggy sold Diamond 10 million copies worldwide of Hot Shot album in 2000, and you talk about Stephen Marley, 8-time Grammy winner. Damian Marley has multiple Grammys. Ziggy, multiple Grammys. Julian and Kimani, incredibly talented and award-winning artists, and just the legacy of their dad Bob is just, for me, there nothing beats it. It's my favorite part about what I do. I love the music. I love the feeling that the music gives people. I love to see the reaction of the crowd. And the music is truly global. I mean, we go everywhere in the world doing for reggae music. We've been to pretty much every continent, right? Like it's truly global. It's appreciated everywhere in the world, and I mean, there's nothing like it.
very, very cool. So I love that you just, the thing that you planned since a long time, basically, or wished for, that you're
Mhm.
basically at the epicenter of that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's Very, very, very cool. So you pretty much toured the whole world, right? So what was the most interesting place that you did a gig at? So
Hmm.
positive, negative, whatever.
So we've had a lot of really cool experiences. I think probably because it's in recent memory,
Mm,
would have to be Saudi Arabia. Recently, Saudi Arabia has started to open up to more Western music and Western culture, and we were one of the first touring acts with Shaggy to play Saudi Arabia. I think Imagine Dragons was the week before us. Sean Paul had been there a couple times before us, but um, we were able to go there and play the Diria season. It was Shaggy Pitbull and Don Omar on the show that night. And dude, the just to see the impact that music has on people, like music is able to build bridges and break down barriers that politics has never been able to do. I mean, international people have been putting um what's the word I'm looking for? All these constraints on the country to try and force change and equal rights and all that kind of stuff, and it hasn't worked. But here's music building these bridges, building barriers. We were in a concert where men and women were together. There was no segregation. And for if people aren't familiar with Shaggy, Shaggy has a song, "Strength of a Woman,"
hmm
and he sang that song from the stage that night, and he always starts the song by saying, "This goes out to my strong independent women," and that's like unheard of in a country like Saudi Arabia, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And dude, just the scream, the crowd was like about 110 decibels when he said that. Just the screaming of the crowd, and to be able to see that, that was a special moment. So I think of that. I think of another one being the first time I worked with Stephen Marley and I heard him sing. He opened the show with Rastaman Vibration, and honestly, it was like a out of body experience because I felt like I was watching Bob Marley. Like he sounds and embodies Bob so much that for me that was like there was nothing like it. I had goosebumps. I've every and still even to this day, every time I get an opportunity to work with Stephen and the Marley Brothers, it's like it's surreal to me. It's like I can't words fail me because it's such an amazing experience. So those are kind of the two sort of, and then I think about things like Kaya Fest, being able to be a part of running that festival from a production standpoint and working with people who I consider family. My brother Veer, who is front of house for Steven and the Marley Brothers, and quite honestly, one of, if not the best front of house engineers I've ever heard mix. Veer and Dean, for those of you watching, go see a Stephen Marley show. Go see a Shaggy show. Um, you're not gonna hear anything like that anywhere else in the world. I promise you. I promise you.
Nice.
Just phenomenal. So being able to that kind of culminates my experiences as it relates to when I think about cool things that I've done, being able to travel with my brothers and bring so much joy to people around the world and show that we can do it like the best of them too. We
Mm.
Caribbean guys are no joke. We we can mix that. We can mix. So that for me is a big part of just the coolness of what I get to do.
Fantastic, fantastic. That's. I mean, your passion and enthusiasm is actually it's quite infectious.
Mm.
Literal goosebumps, man. So very cool. Hey, for the people watching, just I'm not sure if I mentioned that before, but this is a Q&A session. So we will talk and chat about all things live, audio, immersive audio, of course. But if you have any questions for Redz, just type them here in the comments, and we'll be happy to answer pretty much everything, nearly
Hmm.
everything. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
I
Hey,
won't. I
so
won't give you my secret barbecue chicken recipe, but
damn.
everything else.
Okay, this is over. We're stopping this now. All right. Hey, so let's get a little bit into the audio nerdy side in here.
Yeah.
We were chatting earlier about your setup with Stephen Marley. So you have a quite simple but very effective setup there, right? So you're
Yep.
using an SD12,
Yep.
a Fabric, then an SD rack, and then you have a combination of Sennheiser and Shure wireless.
Yes.
You want to can you tell us why you have two different brands of wireless? That's relatively unusual, right?
Yeah, this is a real interesting story. So, when 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 I got hired for Stephen Marley, it was in 2018. Shaggy had just done an album with Sting, the 44876 album, and they were going to tour that album. Now, the tour was really Sting's tour, so it was already set up as a tour for Sting, but then the album happened, so they combined it and called it 44876. So it was Sting's crew that was handling that tour, and so I found myself sitting at home. Um, not having anything to do for the entire year. And I remember when Veer called me and said, "Listen, dude, Stephen Marley is going on tour." This was May of 2018. He said, "We're going to be out on the road till September, October, and then we're going to do an acoustic tour after that. Like it's a full year of touring, but we need to switch to in-ears. So we need a monitor engineer that understands in-ear mixing and has experience with in-ear mixing." And man, it was such a privilege and honor to go into that camp. And like I said, it was a dream come true to work with Steven. And so yeah, I took up the challenge. You're talking about a band that's coming from 100% wedges, side fills, going to in-ears for the first time, never used in-ears. A lot of the musicians had preconceived notions of not liking in-ear monitors. Steven himself wasn't 100% sold on it, and now we got to turn this. Now, for those who work in like pop music and stuff in reggae, we don't really have extended production rehearsals. That's not really a thing. Like we don't, so
Okay.
we go into the first show, and you better get this right. so so
Oh wow.
thankfully enough, the first 3 weeks of the tour was a co-headline tour with Mattis Yahoo, and I kind of expressed to management and our tour manager and Steven the importance of having some sort of production rehearsal. So we flew in a day early to Houston, I remember, and they rented a venue. And brought the gear in early, and we had a full day of rehearsing and sound checks. And that rig what didn't end up being our tour rig. So that rig came from Schubert Systems because it was Mattis Yahoo's crew that spec the rig for that first 3 weeks. And so it was a profile and all Sennheiser ears. So Stephen kind of got used to the sound of Sennheiser ears. And for those who don't know, Stephen Marley is actually a very accomplished producer, has a incredible studio, SSL desk, like, and is very capable of sitting at his console and running his studio. So he's used to a certain sound, a certain analog sound. He likes that analog sound. So after that 3 week tour was done, we had a week break, and then we went to start the tour with Revolution, which was the summer tour. Started in Orlando and was out on the road for, I think, close to 40 or 50 shows. Like it was a pretty extensive tour. It was like 12 weeks long, and that's when we got our new package, which was SD12 and all PSM 900s at the time. This is before we went to 1000s. And Steven called me in the bus after one of the shows, and he's like, "I don't know what happened to the ears that we were using on the previous run." So I was like, "Well, that was Sennheiser. We switched to Shure." He actually didn't like the sound of the Shure because, in his words, it was too high def. It was too clean. He actually, for those who have used ears, you know that the Sennheiser ears have a noise floor, and it's actually fairly obvious. As a monitor engineer, I'm not a big fan of it, but he liked that sound. He liked that sort of analog, dirty. That's how he described it. So no slights against anybody watching from Sennheiser. That's not what this is, but he kind of called it a dirty sound. He liked that sort of the Sennheiser sound. So we ended up, the band liked the PSM 1000s and the clean high def sound. So we just ended up keeping two channels of Sennheiser ears and the rest are PSM 1000s, and we combine it through a PA 821. So we still combine it through a Shure combiner, but
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of how it all came together.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Um, you, I imagine that it can be quite challenging to get all the RF channels in check, depending on where you're traveling, right?
hmm So that's another interesting thing too, because like going into that tour, I wasn't really an RF guy. Like I didn't really I kind of knew how to use Workbench and yeah, but I wasn't a master at it.
Mm.
And we had problems, man. Though we had like I had band coming over to me in the middle of a show, going, "Yo, dude, like my pack's not working." We had some trouble, and but I had to learn it. I had to
Mm.
learn because I didn't have an RF tech on the road. I didn't. But the biggest challenge was, Revolution had a lot of in-ear channels, and then
Mm.
we had a lot of in-ear channels, and then Common Kings, who was opening up, had some in-ear channels, and none of us were kind of coordinating that at first. So we had a lot of problems. The tour didn't have an RF coordinator. Everybody was kind of their own entity,
Oh.
and so I just had to learn. I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials and learn RF coordination. And by I think 3 weeks into the tour, we were fine. Got the production company to bump us up to PSM 1000s because, like I said, we started with 900s at the time.
Mm.
Got it upgraded to 1000s, and yeah, we've been rocking ever since.
Nice. Very cool.
Mhm.
All right. So aside from that, you are using one unit of Fabric, right?
Well, now, so recently, before they actually were heading out on tour with Steven, and then, like I said, the coronavirus happened, and then they canceled it. So we had actually switched it over to a Clang DMI.
Hmm.
But at the time, yes, it was one unit, one Fabric unit.
Okay. Nice. Okay. And are you using the DMI now directly in the board, or are you putting it
Yeah,
in an orange box?
yeah. So it's directly in an SD12.
Hmm.
Um, and the SD12 continues to be the console of choice, mainly because ergonomically, the design is amazing. The screens are more upright. Having dual screens is way better than one screen. So like with an SD10 or 8, like just having the two screens, and obviously with the 96 upgrade for the SD12, it just made it more robust in terms of its IO count.
Hmm.
So and footprint, because the what's unique about like a Stephen Marley tour is that you will go from playing an amphitheater to a venue like Belly Up in Aspen, and anybody who's ever played Belly Up in Aspen would understand how difficult that is to scale. Like
Hmm.
Belly Up is like a small club where like I'll be on stage at Monitor World and I can literally reach out and high five the keyboard player. Like we're like standing right beside each other. So
Okay.
so footprint becomes like a really like a real thing, like because you
Hmm.
go you have to be able to scale not just up but down as well without affecting the integrity and the level of the show. So that's kind of why we continue to rock with the SD12.
Nice. Okay. How many channels? How many inputs are you using there on that production?
I think for Steven, we're probably at, if you count talkbacks,
Hmm.
we're about 64 inputs.
Okay.
I think Dav is watching, so he can correct me if I'm wrong. But we're about at 64. We have a ton of stereo keyboards, some playback stuff that comes from for one song. So he has a song options that he did
Hmm.
with Pitbull. So the unique thing about Stephen Marley is everything is played live.
Hmm.
There's no playback. So there's no tracks, nothing. Everything is like the band plays it live. But it's a fairly big band. There's two keyboard players, bass, guitar, drums, saxophone, and then two background vocals. And Steven also plays guitar, sings, and has a djembe that he plays as well.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And on the Marley Brothers, you are planning to go with the Q3, right?
Yeah, so prior to when we were making all these plans for this year and was interrupted by the universe. For Marley
Yes,
Brothers,
but
yeah, initially we had planned to go with three Q7s. So Veer uses a Quantum 7 at front of house currently, all running redundant. So we have a redundant setup with two wave servers, two of everything.
Mhm.
So we were planning to initially we were using SD5s at monitors, but we had made the decision to go Q7 for me mainly because I was trying to get away from waves at monitors, and use more of the onboard processing. So with the Quantum series having the mustard processing as well as the Spice Rack, I saw an opportunity to move away from using waves. Um, and any sort of outboard processing. Vera uses waves and UAD at front of house, but for me, there was a few reasons: the latency, and sometimes I just had problems when I wasn't. A lot of the Marley Brothers stuff was like festival style, so we weren't necessarily bringing a rig necessarily until we were starting some conversations with some global production companies to support what we were doing. But I just saw moving to the Q7 as a way to get away from using a lot of outboard external processing.
Mm.
And then we went to NAM this January, and Digico announced the Q5 and the Q3 engines and console, and I immediately walked out of the building from the launch, called Veer, and said we're switching to the Quantum 338 for monitors, and he was
I,
like, "Yeah, I don't care." He
I
was
remember
finally.
your face when you saw the Q3 on our booth there.
Yes, yeah. I was like, this is it. I mean, there's a bunch of things I love about it. It's sitting behind me, but the screens are like my favorite part. How
Mm,
bright they are. The daylight screens. Anybody who's ever used a Digico and had to do a sound check in the daytime,
mm,
you know that's the for me the one flaw. The console is flawless except for that one part. Trying to see those screens in the daytime can be difficult, and
mm.
so they have addressed that now with the Q3, and I'm sure in future versions of the Quantum 7 and 5 we can expect to see that. But yeah, so we made the decision to jump to the Quantum 338 at monitors right away.
Cool. All right. Hey, we actually got a question in here. So
Uh-huh.
let me just pull that in here from Vanshai. Oh, I think I'm in the way. Wait.
Yeah, I think you
Okay,
are
so
in
I think I have to
the
move us around a
yeah.
little bit.
Yeah,
I have to change my. Oh, okay.
there we go.
No, it's still not working.
We gotta
So
go down,
apologies,
but that's
everyone.
lower on
Just a reminder, audio guys here. So video is pretty hard. Okay, so question is, do you have musicians using personal mixing as well? What amount of control do you prefer giving them or they ask for? Do you prefer giving them each channel or would you rather have them control a group?
Right. So that's an interesting one. My musicians don't have time to touch another piece of gear. They don't have time to touch a controller, iPad, nothing. Like they're playing.
Mm,
If you ever seen a reggae show, like Riff Raff is surrounded by keyboards, right? Like he has like a million keyboards, right?
nice.
Bowie on the other side is playing two keyboards and he's often playing multiple things at the same time. So actually, for a long time, Jeff Maurice, who was watching from Gear Audio in Canada, tried to get me on Clang, and I was resistant to it because it wasn't integrated into the console. The minute I remember January 2008 when you guys introduced integration into, and it was a beta. I think I messaged Phil on Instagram every day until they finally released the beta. I was like, I need this beta, all right? And then so finally, once the integration was released and it's now integrated into the console, it's become a part of my workflow. So the musicians don't have any sort of we don't use it like an Aviom system or the equivalent, which you can by all means. It works very well doing that. But in our professional setup, I'm still the monitor engineer. I'm still mixing it. I still do all the and how I approach monitor engineering is usually I have a conversation with my musicians, right? So like I'll go to, let's say we take Riff Raff for example, who is the keyboard player. He plays all the organ shuffle. He's like the anchor for the melodic section, right?
Mm,
I'll have a conversation and say, what do you normally like to hear in your mix, right? And his response to me was, I like my mix to sound like the record. I don't want anything jumping out, not even my keyboards. Like I don't want that jumping out. And so then I say, okay, all right. And then I'll go back to the console and create a mix for him and then allow him to tell me what needs to be adjusted. I usually don't start from scratch with the musician. I
mhm,
usually go in and take whether it be tracks or whatever I can get my if I can get my hands on some multi tracks
mhm.
and I will build that mix for them, have them come in and play and then we can tweak it.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
that
you're
makes
gonna be
sense.
sitting there for hours with a musician going, "Yeah, give me 1.5 dB more kick." You would be like, you know what I mean? So, but that conversation is important. Having a conversation first with them and understanding what makes them comfortable in terms of what they need to be here to be hearing to deliver an effective performance. So that has kind of been my approach with like Steven's band. I just have a talk with each musician and find out what they like to hear in the mix. Because some guys like, like with Shaggy is a little bit different. Like for example, Dubs, the guitar player, likes a lot of toms. Because he takes his timing. It's just how him and Natty the drummer have played for centuries. Like, well, I say centuries because they've both been playing for Shaggy for like 17 years, right?
Nice.
So it's just how he gets his feel, and so yeah, once you have that conversation, you know what matters in that mix, because mixing is very much psychology as it is twisting and knobs and pushing faders, right? So understanding the psychology and understanding what a musician needs to be comfortable, what they need to hear to be comfortable. Otti, the keyboard player for Shaggy, needs a lot of hi-hat. If he doesn't hear the hi-hat, his timing is going to be a little bit off. So I understand, okay, when I create a mix for him, the mix is going to be a little hi-hat heavy because that's what he needs. So it's really just understanding that. But to answer the question specifically, no, I am just integrating Clang into my workflow, and sending it out to them. And I remember the first show we used Clang on, Riff Raff came over to me. He's like, "Yo, what is that thing that you're using?" So I'm like, but I was like, "Oh crap, he doesn't like it." He's like, "I don't like it. I love it." And then I was like, all right, yep. Clang works, right? Because just the
Nice.
space, and I'm sure we'll get more into that. The space that you're able to create um, when using Clang is unbelievable.
Nice. Hey, question for that. Are you musicians aware of Klang? Because there's those two schools of thoughts of just using it as a tool and not talking about it and just using the benefits of it, or actively talking to the musicians and giving them the option to just move stuff around.
Right. It is dependent on the musician. One thing I've learned about Stephen Marley is you should never implement anything without first having a conversation with him. If
Okay.
he comes up and notices even the slightest difference, it will throw him off. And I think a lot of artists are like that. Artists are creatures of habit. They like things to be consistent. So with Steven, I kind of told him, I didn't tell him what it was. I said, I had and he's reasonable. And because he has his studio and has a technical background and understands technical concepts, you can have such conversations with him. So for me, it was I went into the room and said, "Hey, Steve, we're gonna try. I'm gonna be trying something on the in-ear mix. I think it's gonna help. It's gonna make it better, but you can let me know." And then after the rehearsal, he was like, "Yeah, I love it. It's good. We use it, right?" So I think that's the key. You have to know your musicians though, but I don't kind of go into detail with with the musicians I work with, because quite honestly, they don't need it. It's they don't need to have all that information. They don't need to know how it's working. They don't need to. For me, it's just a tool that I'm using to create space in your mix and make your mix more cohesive, right? So but yeah, you could get into if musician, especially you have some musicians that are super technical because maybe they have their own studio, or maybe they they're nerdy like me, get into like they like a lot of that stuff. You could run into like people just being like super picky and taking up a lot of time trying to get something in the perfect spot. But so for me, it's just a tool that I have implemented into what my workflow to make my life easier. But the additional benefit is that they enjoy it, because now because in-ear monitoring can be fairly isolating if you're not used to it, right? Like if you've never used the in-ear monitor, now you're used to, and we can chat about the science of how you hear normally binaurally, and if you're used to having something around you and all of a sudden it's inside your head, especially if you're a vocalist. Now your vocal is like in here. It's like weird, right? So I think that's kind of how I've always approached it, if you will.
Very cool. Um, so I see you have a session opened over there on Clang.
Yes, sir.
Can you show us a little bit how you approach setting up Clang? Do you have some strategies, or is it all intuitive trying around?
Right. All right. So at first, when I came across Clang, and I'll explain this before I show the session so people understand what I'm showing. Um, I thought about, and which is what people naturally default to, which is placing things like how they are on stage.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that concept is if you're the keyboard player all the way stage left and everything is on your right side, now you're playing like this because like it's like overloaded on one side.
Mm-hmm.
So after giving it more thought, I started to think about what if you could place things in a mix, not necessarily just how they are on stage, but also how they should sit in a mix. And this is kind of through um, conversations with Steve, because Steven would say, "All right, I like the organ, like," and you know how artists use like hand gestures, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're like, but that's perfect for clang because you can actually now put it where they're gesturing to, right? So he would say like, "Yo, I have to hear the organ like right here," and then he would say like the bass can be like here, and then like the audience can be out here, and I'm just copying everything he's gesturing to me on. I'm doing in clang without him understanding that that's what I'm doing. But
I
now,
love it.
now when he puts his in ears in, he's like, yeah, 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 that like that's right. What I do is instead of necessarily placing things how they are on stage, you guys have seen the graphics of like how you build a mix and
Mm-hmm.
positioning of things if you were, let's say, mixing a record. That's kind of the approach I take because most of my musicians, Steven especially, wants his in-ear mix to sound like the record. He's not really interested in stuff jumping out. Obviously, vocal needs to be on top for him, but everything else, and there are certain key things that have to be upfront in that mix. So if we go to my page here, this kind of shows you a little bit of how it's kind of jumbled because it's not stretched really wide, but
Mm-hmm.
this is his vocal here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now the reason why his vocal is like that is because if you think about, let's say, how you hear your vocal naturally, right? Like when
Mm-hmm.
you speak, you don't hear your vocal inside your head unless you wear in headphones, right? When you're hearing normally, you hear your vocal out in front of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times what people don't always think about is not just the horizontal placement that you're able to do in clang, which the horizontal in the binaural space is important, but the vertical placement is also incredibly important, right? So his vocal is
Agreed.
here, it's center, but it's above that median line. So
Mm-hmm.
it gives the perception as if he's hearing the vocal where he would normally hear his vocal naturally,
Got
which
it.
is out in front of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I start with the stuff that's important for him. His
Mm-hmm.
guitar. So this is his guitar here. I hope you guys can see my cursor,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the
Let
guitar.
me just
So
get rid of my picture here
yeah.
so I'm not in the way. Okay,
So
so.
one of the things we struggled with prior to using Clang, right, was his when he plays and sings guitar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the he's playing what we refer to as the cheque in reggae. So it's that check, right? And that tone of that guitar sits right on top of the vocal,
Mm-hmm.
like in terms of acoustic spacing, right? Like the EQing of it, everything about the tone of it is competing with that vocal, right? So the problem you're facing is if you EQ, and if you're a monitor engineer, you would understand this. Like to get things to sit cohesively in a mix, you sort of have to hyper EQ it, right? To get everything to space correctly, right? Well, the
Right.
problem is if you EQ'd the guitar, he would complain about the tone of the guitar. And if you EQ'd the vocal, he'd complain about the tone of the vocal. So we were having this problem of getting those things to fit properly. So if the guitar, he would complain about, I can't hear the guitar, or maybe he complain about my vocal. When I'm playing the guitar, I can't hear my vocal. And simply by spreading them and moving one below the other, it solves that problem, which
Perfect.
is incredible. So that's his guitar there. And then what are the other things? So timing is important. So I do the same thing with the kick in and the kick out. I have the kick in sort of on the median line, and then this is my kick out here. These things down here I'm not using, so I kind of just move them out of the way for purposes of this demonstration. This is my snare top and bottom here, snare 2 top and bottom. beside
Hmm.
it, and then the hi-hats over here. So it kind of sounds like the drum is in its correct position behind him. And then the toms are sort of spread like how the toms are, right?
Hmm.
But then the next most important thing for him is well, Ranoy's guitar, which is also important. That's sitting here in the mix. Ranoy stands to his right on stage, so it's the same way Ranoy is on stage, but again, um, the vertical placement of it is placed above the median line, right? And then the next most important thing is the organ for him. That organ bubble and shuffle in reggae music is incredibly important for him. He has to hear that in his mix.
Hmm.
So that's why that is placed here. And then I spread the keyboards based on this is Riff Raff on this side, which is on his left normally.
Hmm.
Well, all the time Riff Raff is on stage left, and then stage right is Bowie's keyboards, the Montage and the Kronos, and that's how they're set, top and bottom. And then the background vocals are over here on the left. And then the cool thing I found is putting the audience below.
Hmm.
I don't have to write like Stephen has to hear the audience because he's very big on that crowd interaction. So I used to be fading in and out that audience mic like a lot, like just riding that fader because especially when you're playing amphitheaters and Veer mixes fairly loud. Um, when you leave that audience mic up, all you're getting is ambience coming back in like from the PA. So I would just like feather in the audience when I needed it when he was doing any interaction pieces. But what I found is by moving the audience low, um, below the median line in clang, I don't have to take it all the way out all the time. I can actually leave the audience in there because what was happening is that if I got distracted doing something else and forgot to bring in the audience, he would let me know after the show. Listen, I was missing the audience, and he would remember the exact song. Like he'd be like, "I was singing One Love, and you missed one of the audience punches." And so by moving the audience low in the mix and below the median line, it allows me to sort of keep them in there lightly. So if in case I forget to bring it up to like it's still there, so he can still hear it. So
Nice.
yeah, that's kind of simply how it's all laid out. Sax and flute is sitting over here, right? And then this is my bass DI and the bass amp. Again, just splitting them so phase doesn't become an issue. And then for the one song that he uses, the loop, it's sitting right here a little bit narrower because the loop is more than just drum programming for options. It actually carries a lot of the melodic information of the song, so I'm not spreading it too wide. I'm kind of keeping it narrow. So I like the ability to be able to change vertical, but also to be able to vary the width of the stereo spread of the information.
Very cool. All right. Hey, that's you just brought up an interesting point. Hey, where am I?
Yeah.
Back on your lap. That's it's a little bit weird, but not a video guy. Okay, so you just mentioned that you spread the bass in the elevation a little bit to get rid of phase issues.
Mhm.
How did you mean that?
Because I find when you have the bass and sitting right on top of each other, right? Again, because I'm moving away from plugins like InPhase that tend to create a lot of latency. Um, Sometimes just by flipping the phase, you still don't get accurate phase coherence. So we use a DI and an amp line, right? So the DI is obviously direct pre his amp, but because Chris Meredith, who is one of the best there is when it comes to reggae bass and has been playing with Stephen for decades, right? He has an incredible tone coming off the amp. But obviously that DI signal is going to be a little bit quicker than your amp signal, right?
Sure.
So you're going to either have to delay the DI signal or use a plugin like InPhase to bring it in phase. Um, I don't know about any other audio guys. Man, I listen to some of these audio guys teaching, some of these guys that are like super smart, like Robert Scoville, and he's talking about delaying inputs in samples. I ain't that smart. for one, and two, I never have that amount of time to go measure delay time of samples and stuff. So just by splitting that in that vertical plane, it lessens the impact. I don't know what the science. I just know it sounds good when I
Yeah,
when I when I split it, and you guys are able to. I heard you explain like scientifically why that works, and I was like, okay, so I'm not crazy, but you get what I'm saying. It kind of
absolutely.
separates that signal so that it's not phase canceling, and you can get the real good tone of the bass guitar or the kick drum or the snare, depending on what you're using, right?
No, that actually makes perfect sense. It's just it's really interesting. I don't think I have ever thought about it for like a multi-miking situation like this, where a similar effect comes in very handy is when you have a lot of open mics on stage, which I guess would be also the case in pretty much all the acts that you're working with.
Right,
So the thing is, if you're mixing in stereo and you have all those open mics and somebody hits a snare drum, for example,
right.
the snare will be on pretty much every microphone, but in different timings because of speed of sound. And when you just put that together in one stereo plane, then you get a very washed transients and you get this muddy, phasey sound out of the bleeding. Not the direct signal, but the bleeding in there.
Right.
So by using Klang and just spreading the microphones in different positions, the
Yeah,
brain will interpret those timing differences just as
exactly.
distance between them, but you don't hear the phase cancellations or the comp filters that are happening through it anymore.
Right, right.
So it's really cool to think about that in a bass. Also, I found it really interesting that your bass is panned. That's something that you probably weren't doing when you were still working in stereo, right?
No, definitely wasn't doing that in stereo. That's definitely a Clang thing. And the reason is because of sort of where he stands on stage. He's right next to the drum kit, so he's not that far off, but he is slightly off. So just giving I pan it ever so slightly just to give a little bit of depth perception and positioning in terms of when Steve and obviously like this is Steven's mix we were looking at. This file doesn't have anything in yet because we're actually rebuilding this in one of my master classes, so I haven't dialed anything into it yet. But and that's another thing for approach too, which is probably would raise a question. What I do is I try to, prior to a sound check or rehearsal, set my positions that I know I'm gonna want to use, so that when I start to send signal to it, like it's already in the position where I want it. So yes, I do sort of pan, and that's just taking the bass off of the kick drum a little bit too, to be able to create some definition in terms of kick and bass, because obviously, especially in reggae music, I mean, all types of music, the correlation between kick drum and bass guitar is very important, but even more so in reggae music, where the kick and bass is sort of driving, kick obviously driving tempo and groove, and the bass driving the low end, right? So very, and actually, funny enough, Steven actually takes a lot of his tonal cues from the bass guitar. Like he's listening out a lot of times to the bass to sort of
Interesting.
anchor his tone. So yeah, like because I was getting like a lot of times prior to Clang, I would have that issue of that he would complain about the definition between kick and bass. Like he'd be like, I can't, like if I ask for more bass, I feel like I'm losing the kick, and just by spreading them slightly off in terms of panning, it helps that tremendously.
Nice. Cool.
I saw Veer's comment in Facebook. He said he uses one line the amp. Yeah, he. That's because if he loses the amp line, he picks up his talkback and yells at me to go figure out what's happening. So I need the DI line to keep working while I'm running from the console to figure out why he's lost the amp line. So that that's why
Got
I
it.
use both.
Okay. Makes total sense. Makes total sense. Um, Ambience. You were talking about the ambience. I really liked your comments on that. That you can just leave it more in there. First question: which ambience mics are you typically using?
So I use Sennheiser MKE shotguns. I think it's the MKE 600 shotguns. And I've played so much with the positioning of those. Like, so now what we've started to do is put those on actually tall boom stands, and put them way up and sort of point down into the audience.
Cool.
um, because bro, like when again, it's one thing when you're playing amphitheaters and the audience is like 25 feet away, but then you go to a place like Belly Up where the person standing in the front row is at the same level as the audience mic.
Hmm.
And if they're talking throughout the show or they're singing along, like, so yeah, so we use the Sennheiser MKE 600 shotguns, and then that's, yeah, that's kind of my choice for ambient miking.
Very cool. Very cool. Nice. And how do you treat them? Do you use a lot of low cut, high cut, or do you tend to keep them more open? Do you have any strategies for that,
Yeah.
or does it
Yeah,
only depend on the room?
it depends a lot on the room. It depends on how much low end I'm getting back from the PA.
Hmm.
Where the mics are sitting, like it changes every day. But definitely a lot of like high pass filtering. Um, I try not to EQ. Those mics sound really good, like
Hmm.
as shotgun microphones. So I don't do a lot of EQ boosting or cutting. Sometimes I may boost somewhere in between 2.5 to 3.5 just to get a little bit of that crowd to cut through in the mix. Because again, if he's doing a song like um Mission from Jungle to Rima, right? He sings and then he wants to hear the crowd sing, but the band doesn't always stop playing. The band is still going like
Hmm.
full. So just to get that to cut through, I might boost a little bit of 2.5, 3.15 to get that harshness of the audience to come through that mix.
Cool.
But yeah, definitely I'm usually high passing that somewhere around 200 hertz, just because
Okay.
if not, the PA, just the like reggae is low frequency. Like Veer
Yeah, sure.
is hammering those subs out there. So if I have to high pass that to not get like that low end build up in his
Yeah,
audience,
makes sense.
mind. But
But I mean,
that's
200
basically
hertz
it.
is relatively low actually. So you're
Yeah,
getting a quite full range sound. You're just getting rid of like the really deep
yeah,
rumble, right? Okay.
yeah. Exactly.
Nice, nice. Hey, I know that you are, aside from those Sennheiser ambience mics, you're using a lot of DPA mics, right?
100%.
So you did.
Every microphone on our stage is DPA. If it's a microphone, it's a DPA, and if it's a DI box, it's a radial.
Cool.
Both Vera and I are radial artists. Dean is a radial artist as well for Shaggy, so we
Hmm.
use radial DI boxes for both Shaggy and the Marleys.
Hmm.
But Jeff Maurice is a big reason why we're all DPA. So we're 100% DPA on the stage. We use 2011s on guitars. I promise you, you'll never hear a better sounding guitar mic than a 2011.
No
2011
doubt.
on 2011 on the inside of the kick is life changing.
Hmm.
It's unbelievable. We use 4099s on toms, snares. Um, I am about to introduce Vera. I know he's watching, so I'm about to introduce him to a 4011
Hmm.
on the snare, and I know when he hears that, it's gonna be game over because it's like a 4099 on steroids. But yeah, we're 100% DPA, and shout out to Bo Brink and the awesome guys, Paul Andrews and all the guys from DPA that are such good friends and
Yeah.
supporters, and of
Oh,
course Gerard who make sure that we're well taken care of.
sure. Yeah. We actually, I think we're both using DPA mics
Yes,
for
I
our
am
voices right
on
now,
a
right?
6066 that you can't really see. But yeah, that's a 6066.
Hmm.
It's phenomenal. Thanks
Nice.
again to Jeff and Gear Audio for making
Cool.
sure I sound good on my webinars.
Since you just mentioned Bo, our friend in common from Denmark, he once did a masterclass on DPA where he was giving some really interesting insights on how to most efficiently place ambience mics. So,
Hmm.
for everyone watching, check out the webinars that DPA do. I'm pretty sure that
Yep.
Bo will mention something like that as well. So I found that quite eye-opening. Some very
Yeah.
simple tricks.
I think between yourself and Bo and Jeff Maurice are probably three of the smartest people I have ever met. Like when you guys talk, I just stand there going, "Oh yeah, that's pretty good."
Oh, I'm
So yeah,
blushing
like
now.
I think when you guys get watch like the stuff that Bo is doing with DPA and stuff is just phenomenal.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I actually had the pleasure to do a couple of seminars together with him, where we're talking about the two different ends of the cable, you know, and
Right.
it's really interesting if you really take the science and the psychology and all that stuff. Microphones and in-ear systems have so many similarities in terms of what you want to look for and
Right.
what you want to treat in it. Hey,
Absolutely.
we got a couple of questions in here.
Yep.
So from Junior, during the show, you always listening to Steven's mix, or do you have a tech mix, or periodically listen to all musicians?
Okay, that's a good question. And shout out to Junior. Junior is the monitor engineer for Protege, reggae artist. So yeah, shout out to Junior, a friend of mine. So I know on Digicos, I don't know about other consoles. In your solo bus, you can set up a no solo, which means that when you don't have a solo engaged, what you're hearing, and that's always for me on Steven's mix. So when I don't have anything soloed and I'm not working on something, I'm always listening to Steven. But I cycle through constantly. Like I'm constantly going through the other musicians, constantly checking. If you see me on a Marley show, my hands never leave the console. Like I literally, like, thankfully we have stage techs. We got Travis. And on the Marley Brothers stuff, I have Davin who does audio crew chief, and he does our patch. And then I got Travis, who's a stage tech, and also Steven's guitar tech, and we have Chris Miller. Just that fantastic team that I don't have time to. My hands never leave the console, so I'm 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 constantly cycling through all the musicians, constantly making sure they're okay. I try to be as proactive as possible, right? Like
Hmm.
I try not to have musicians have to ask for something, right? So I'm constantly, and that's actually something I learned from Veer too, coming into the Stephen Marley camp. He was like, these guys you need to constantly be making sure, like, cycle those mixes constantly. Dean always talks about that too. So I can't take full credit for doing that. Like Veer and Dean have always said, that's very important part of this workflow, and Dean taught me that early in my days touring with Shaggy. So I tend to do that, just constantly be cycling through mixes.
Okay, cool. There's another question from Junior. How fast is the Clang workflow versus stereo IEMs?
Um, it's no different because now that it's integrated, I mean, it might be difficult if you're not on a Digico. So I'm a Digico user. Have been for the last 8 years, and I'm not really interested in using anything else.
Hmm.
Just my workflow is so Digico now that I'm so deep that and it does everything I need it to do. It there's a few reasons why too. Yesterday on my masterclass, I talked about being able to send groups to auxes, bus groups into groups. You can't do that on other consoles. So I continue to use Digico. They continue to make the platform better and more effective. So if you're going to use Clang, definitely you want to be on a Digico. Not saying that you can't use it with something else, but it's integrated right in. So it's the same as sending to a stereo mix. What I will say, however, is that you will do less once you implement Clang. You will chase mixes less once you implement Clang. Because of the spacing that's now in the mix, you're going to find that from song to song, the adjustments that you may have had to make before, because they're now hearing things binaurally and spaced, rather than everything sort of sitting on top of each other in a stereo mix, you're going to chase mixes a lot less.
Hmm.
So you're going to find that you have less adjustments throughout the show. So it actually makes the workflow better in many ways.
Cool. All right. So you're actually doing less level changes. Were there other changes that you noticed when you started using Clang? Like in what we get back a lot is, for example, that the mixes are more evened out. You know, that there are not so many extremely loud signals in there, um, and of course that the general volume goes down. Is anything
Yes.
of that did that happen with you as well?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, most of Steven's band, I mean, minus like the drummer runs his pack really loud. Steven runs his pack really loud. But they're also the two oldest gentlemen. Well, other than Chris, the bass player, they're Steven. I remember him saying to Ranoy, the guitar player, one day that Ranoy can't check his ears because Ranoy's ears are young and Steven has 50-year-old ears. So, um, it they run their pack a little bit hotter, but so we've never really had like a level issue. Like they don't really run their packs real super loud. But definitely the mixes are leveled out a little bit better. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm also very I grew up mixing on analog desks, so gain structure was very important. So I still operate that way even in digital. Like I gain everything to sort of the same level as much as I can, because you have some instruments that are transient. But what I would say too is for a lot of monitor engineers who use like sort of mix bus compressors to sort of glue, so to speak, your mix together.
Hmm.
Um, I don't have to do that when I'm using Clang. Like it's just way
Interesting.
more cohesive. The mix just sounds way more cohesive. It's hard to explain, but I know monitor engineers watching will understand what I'm talking about. Like it sometimes it gets difficult when you're just sending individual signals into a mix where it just sounds that way. It sounds
Hmm.
like, okay, now I have a mix, but it's really just individual signals that I'm sending to an in-ear monitor rather than
Hmm.
it being a mix, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, but I can't say I necessarily notice level changes, but I do notice that we're not like the louder transients have come
Hmm.
down quite a bit.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, and that helps already because that, of course, reduces the general level a little bit.
Yeah.
If those, breaking out signals are a little bit tamed. Cool. Hey, Junior, thank you very much for those questions. They were very, very good questions. All right. Hey, since you just mentioned it, your master classes, you're doing online training right now
Yep.
under the label Learn from the Pros, right?
So we have two. We have Learn from the Pros, which is a free training series that we're doing that
Hmm.
runs usually Wednesday to Friday. We might be changing that a little bit, but that normally runs on Wednesday to Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Where I interview a different professional. I saw Ricky Ashford log into this. He's going to be on. Amazing engineer. Veer has been a guest of mine. All good friends of mine who are working professionals in the industry, just kind of learning their story. But I also do like structured audio training. So, well, let me say this: if you're interested in finding out everything that I'm doing, if you go to jasonreynoldsproaudio.com, you can opt in with your email for free. And I send out a weekly email to let you know what I'm doing. And then there's patreon.com/Jason Reynolds Pro Audio. I do bi-weekly masterclasses on that platform, which is a live masterclass. I'm teaching everything. Like I'm showing everything. There's no secrets. There's nothing, no information withheld. I'm deconstructing mixes. Yesterday I did a advanced digital training, so um, pretty much everything, the console inside out. So that's a cool thing for anybody who's looking for um, structured audio training. It's patreon.com/Jason Reynolds Pro Audio.
Nice. Yeah, for anybody watching, in case you didn't write down the links or something, just send us a message. We'll make sure to send you the correct links to these trainings. Very, very cool, and I can only recommend it. I mean, we did one training together. We did this today together, and I can definitely testify that you have a lot of interesting things to teach people, and you have a really interesting approach to doing it. Hey, I see you just
Appreciate it,
already.
man. Yeah,
Oh, you're
I
much
just typed it
you're
there so
much
you could
faster
send
than me.
it. Only because I
Nice.
got it on my phone. So
While we are at links for other trainings, maybe my colleague Marcus, who is in the comments right now, could drop in the links to the other Klang webinars for the people who have um, not worked with Klang yet and they want to have an insight on how we can use it and how we can set it up and all that stuff. We already did quite a few webinars, and you can still watch them, of course. So maybe Marcus, can you drop those links in the comments? All
Mhm.
right. Hey, last question. Out of curiosity, which in-ears are you using?
Oh, anybody who follows me on Facebook or Instagram knows that I am JH Audio ambassador. I am Captain JH Audio. pull my chest open and say I have a J, the flying girl right across my chest. No, yeah, I made this. I made the jump to JH Audio 6 years ago. I'm very happy. I've had the opportunity to meet Jerry Harvey. I think he's a master. He's an incredible human being, incredible person. Thomas Reed, who is my artist rep, is one of my favorite people, and also the guys in Orlando, TJ and Tyler. Man, I love JH Audio. I'm on Roxanne's.
Mhm.
That's my in-ear of choice. And I love them. Every artist that I move to, Stephen Marley is on Roxanne's. Shaggy is on Roxanne's. I'm a huge and it's not just about sound. Let me say this. When you're a touring person, um, you want to make sure that the companies that you deal with, you can get great support from. They have your back. That's also a big part of why. I mean, every time I've messaged you, Phil, you've responded. You helped me out. Jeff, Maurice, and the guys at Gear Audio always take my call. I laugh at how sometimes I yell at Jeff, and he just for those who know Jeff, he just kind of sits there on the phone going, uh huh, yeah, yeah, you're right. All right, now let me tell you how to fix it. So so Jeff has
sounds
been like
sounds
the,
like
the
Jeff. Yeah.
support. Yeah, exactly. Like
Nice.
incredible support. And it's the same from JH. I mean, I've had. Here's the thing: nothing that is in this industry, nothing as it relates to technology, is bulletproof. But when you have people that will move heaven and earth to get you a replacement or fix the problem, or they'll never rest until the problem is sorted out. That's the people you want to work with. You want to work with the people who care about you, who wanna see you go far, wanna see you grow, and want to be a part of that growth. And that's the experience I've had with JH Audio. I'm a huge Audio supporter. I love those guys. I love the gear. I love the in-ear monitors. I've been to the factory in Orlando. Man, it you can't get much better. And so yeah, huge shout out to those guys, Tyler, TJ, Thomas, Jerry, every the entire staff there, just incredible people.
Cool. Hey, that is actually the perfect final topic of our talk because next week in our webinar, How Do You Immerse, my guest will be Jerry Harvey. So I
Amazing.
have the master himself in the webinar, and um, everyone can just pick his brain about in-ears, about the really, really exciting story, how he came from being a monitor engineer for some of the biggest artists of the time, like Van Halen, for example, and
Yeah.
many, many more, to um, innovating after innovating after innovating in the in-ear monitoring design. So next week, same time as today on Thursday, we'll have the webinar with Jerry Harvey. So I will definitely send him your best regards.
Yes. Thank you. I'll be there. I might do some heckling from the comments.
Please
We'll
do,
see.
please do. All right. Hey, before we wrap this up, are there any final questions, or did we touch all the topics already? So
Shout out,
last
shout
chance now.
out to Kyle McMahon. I just saw him log in. Kyle, of course, does a lot of training for Group One for Digico in the US, and he's answered some of my crazy questions. I always reach out to him. So shout out to
Hi, Kyle.
Kyle and the other guys from Group One for sure.
Very, very good. Cool. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time. Thanking so much for taking us in your basement, which is a really
Yeah,
cool basement, actually.
it's
A
pretty
little bit
cool, man.
jealous. I only have an 11 here. I need to
Oh
I need
yeah,
to upgrade that.
it's a little bit more than 11.
No, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story and your approach. I think we all learned a lot in this hour.
Yes.
So have a really nice day, and I really, really hope to see you in person again very, very soon. It's
Yeah,
about
yeah.
time
Hopefully we get
for
we
some
get out.
drinks, man.
Want to wish everybody a healthy and safe quarantine time. Stay healthy, stay safe, and hopefully we get out again soon. But I thank you for having me, man. Like doing stuff like this for me is a dream come true. I when I started in this industry, I never thought that this little kid from Jamaica could make a splash and to be sitting here with and doing things for Digico, doing things for Clang, and being able to share my passion for what I do is really a dream come true and incredible. So thank you for your support. Thank you to the Marcus, everybody at Clang, Gear Audio. I can't say enough about Jeff Maurice, Pete Snellgrove, Bob, Ian, Celine, everybody at Gear Audio is such an incredible support to my career. Shout out the guys at Adamson, Jeremiah, who Adamson had me on their webinar, Jade Decide, the dudes from Mix U, just anybody who has ever sewn into my career, anybody who's ever left an encouraging word, anybody who's ever supported me. I want to take this opportunity to just say thank you. I'm always humbled by it, and I appreciate the love and support.
Perfect. I'm from, I can say from our side, and I'm pretty sure it's for everyone else, that is definitely a mutual feeling. Um, Thanks again, and yeah, see you very, very soon as we are left out of the cages. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Hey, for everybody else, if you have any questions, if you remember questions later, just feel free to just send us an email, send us a message on Facebook. If you have comments, wishes for further webinars, let us know about it. We will keep doing these as long as people are watching those. So, yeah, let us know if there are questions for Redz. We will definitely forward them to him and make sure that they will be answered. All right.
For sure.
Cool. Have a really, really nice day. Bye, everyone.